The Angry Marks Podcast Network is brought to you by WrestleWork, a social network to connect, create, and share everything about pro wrestling. Check it out today at WrestleWork.com.
You're listening to the Angry Marks Podcast Network.
But back to Johnny and Shane. When they put us together, Johnny and I had been friends. Johnny was, not the greatest wrestler. It certainly wasn't the worst. But we had been friends for quite some time. And being on the road the way the business was run back then, where we were on the road 320, 330, 40 days a year, you want to make sure that you're traveling with somebody that you like being around. And Johnny and I always got along very well, and I had no problem on that end of it. But it was only after they started coming up with, we were told after a certain point that we weren't allowed to do high-impact moves because we weren't that kind of a team, and we weren't. I remember one night in Troy, New York, and Buffalo the next night, Sid and Danny Spivey were telling us that we couldn't Irish whip them because we weren't big enough. Now, Johnny's like 6'4", I'm 6'1". Danny outweighed Johnny by about 30 pounds, maybe 40 pounds, and maybe 50 pounds outweighed me. And so for us being told we couldn't even Irish whip somebody, it became very apparent that somebody on a political level had clipped the wings of that team, and it was doomed to failure. That said, we sold more merchandise than anybody in the company that first summer that we were together. We were the hottest merchandising team in the company. Outsold Sting, outsold the Road Warriors, outsold Flair, outsold anybody else that was with the company. And, they should have seen the writing on the wall, what could have been there, and they chose not to. Great teams are usually predicated upon one guy being a workhorse and the other guy being, the showcase, so to speak. Like if you look at Stan Lane and Bobby Eaton, Bobby certainly was a workhorse. Stan would get in there and do the dancing and smile that pretty smile to the girls, and it worked. There was something about the chemistry that worked. And, I think they were trying to repeat that with me and Johnny. And I think we were, a decent team that could have gotten over. It was packaged right. But all cards on the table. I was thrilled because it was the first time in my career that I'd made real money. I was putting money away. My rent was like $175 a month or some crazy number. And I was on the road all the time, so it's a little tiny dinky apartment. I'm calling home every month. My mother was taking care of my finances. You got $30,000 in the bank. You got $60,000 in the bank. You got $90,000 in the bank. It was just growing. Never home to spend it. And to me, it was a fantastic time in my career as far as that goes, because in this business you can starve for quite a long time, and I did in this business. So when I was suddenly making good money, I figured at some point the rest of it would fall into place. And I'm a firm believer that where you arrive in life is based on where you've been. And so, all the things that came later in my career, Ricky Steamboat and the franchise character and world champion and everything else, that was all part of the ingredients that went into that recipe. So, it was for better, for worse. The WWF stint in '96 included. You learn good things, you learn bad things, you learn things you want to do, things you don't want to do again. And I think that all played into making the character that ultimately became the franchise.
Yeah, Shane, you made mention of Ric Flair, and the last thing I want to do is beat a dead horse in the ground. But for all of us older fans who are aware that you and Flair exactly haven't been, on the closest level, can you enlighten younger fans of what your issue with Ric Flair is? And number two, have you talked to Flair in the years since? Have you guys made peace or anything of that sort?
Well, I'll start with the first part of the question. The heat came from, like the example I just gave you a second ago in Bristol, Tennessee. That was just a small taste of a small sample of what guys like me and Johnny and Steve Austin and Brian Pillman and Tom Zank and the list goes on and on about Dustin Rhodes and, just go down the line of talents that had all gone on to bigger and better things after. But this business had always been predicated on the established stars in the business searching for and finding the next generation and teaching them, passing the torch to them, so to speak. Flair had it passed to him. And by that point, he was, I think, turned 40. In fact, I was at his 40th birthday party. Johnny and I were in Greensboro, North Carolina, in 88 or 89, late 89, I think it was. And, it was clear that Rick's better days were behind him, and I'm not suggesting he couldn't have had a good match after that. Rick was the reason I got into wrestling, but he was at that stage where it was time for him to start passing that torch, and instead he vociferously used the politics of the business to try to keep people like me and Johnny and Austin and Zank and a bunch of us held down and not given that opportunity. And like for give an example, when I was at WCW, they ran Pittsburgh, I forget how many times a year. Not one time did I ever wrestle in Pittsburgh when WCW was here. That just doesn't make sense. When you have a local kid that's from here, that everybody in Pittsburgh knew who I was, and that I'd always been from Pittsburgh. Had been was a rising star in wrestling. From a booking standpoint, from a promotional and marketing standpoint, it makes no sense to send me to any place else other than Pittsburgh when they're running those nights. That decision had been made in a room somewhere for WCW. That wasn't just somebody throwing darts at a board and saying, okay, well, let's send Shane to the other city. It was a clear design. And for me, that's just a few of the examples. And then later it went on to a personal issue with me whenever I went to Flair. Flair knew that, I had told him multiple times of what a fan I was, how much I idolized him and held him up on, as the wrestler. To me, Ric Flair was the wrestler. And asked him several times if he'd watch my matches and give me some pointers. And he'd tell me, he put his hand on my shoulder one night and he said it would be an honor, Shane. And over the next several weeks or months, he started giving me very generic feedback. Good fire, good selling. You didn't die. Just real general stuff. Nothing specific. He didn't come to me and say, when you started the match and you did that opening spot with the arm drag, that was good, but you should have done it like this. There was nothing nearly that specific. So back then I used to do a running vaulted cross body block off the top rope, off of, Irish whip into the turnbuckle. I'd vault to the top turnbuckle and turn around and shoot body press. On one particular night I decided I wasn't going to do it, so I could specifically ask him about that after the match, and I didn't. I didn't do the move, and I came back, and he started giving me the same generic feedback he'd always give him, and I asked him, what do you think of the cross body block tonight? And honest to God, I wanted to hear him say, I didn't see a cross body block. And instead, he paused and he thought about it for a second. He went, perfect, better than Steamboat. And when he said that, It was just like my heart dropped. Like this giant in my head became a midget. And then have been around the business and being the world champion and being the guy that's been asked to look at watch other people's matches, I take that very seriously. Because, I'll either tell the guys, yes, I'll watch it and give them serious feedback. It may not be what they want to hear, but I'll give them serious feedback. Or I'll tell them if I don't have time or I'm getting ready for my match, whatever, sorry, I don't have time tonight, can't do it. But I'll never tell somebody yes and then give them bullshit feedback. And so years later when ECW came and Paul used to just give me the microphone and say, just say whatever you want. There's no direction on what I was saying. So I started shooting on Flair because, again, truth be known, the reason I shot on Flair in Philadelphia was because other than Charlotte and Chicago, Philadelphia was the Nature Boys' most over town. Right. So I thought by shooting on Ric Flair in Philadelphia, it will get me, the heel franchise, heat. And instead, the fans started turning on Flair and started burying Flair. So it wasn't the outcome I was looking for, but I thought, if nothing else, he's getting the message. And, he tried a couple times on people, firebacks and stuff, which I just lobbied right back to him. And, it is what it is. I mean, we're never going to send each other Christmas cards or anything, but, when his son Reed died, a year and a half, 2 years ago, I saw him at an event in, Rostraver, Pennsylvania. And I went up to him and I told him that, as a father, from everything else aside, my heart breaks for you, Rick. I'm so sorry to hear about Reed. And I got a tear in his eye, and he reached over and shook my hand, and, that was about the closest we'd come. And, that said, then I hear people, all the time coming in, you hear what Rick said about you? To me at this point, it's like good humor. It's, You know, you had your chance in WCW whenever I went there. Bischoff brought me to WCW at the end specifically to be the one. His exact words to me were, "I would like to be the one to bring you and Flair to television." And then with all the political shakeup that started at that time, Russo was in, Russo was out, Bischoff was in, Bischoff was out, this guy was here, that guy's gone. It was just this rotating door of, you know, no direction, no design, no ideas, just, you know, guys going to the ring and just vomiting up stuff and coming back with no, you know, no thread or string running through anything, no storyline.